People who watch security cameras for a living, what creepy things have you tried to forget? Worked as a harbor master a while ago. Had to check the marina's cameras after a boat was abandoned at our docks. I was looking for the owner. I looked on the tape from the boat's first night in the marina. The man who had sailed the boat and was standing on the end of his boat for 2 hours, barely moving. Then at 1:30 a.m. he just walked off the back and dropped into the water. He never came back up. Never found his body. Freaky. I used to do its support for a charity that supplied housing and support for homeless people. A large proportion also had mental health issues, so there were a fair amount of interesting events that happened. Being in it, I avoided experiencing most of it firsthand, though I was threatened with being stabbed on about my 3rd day. Anyway, I come in one Monday, and there's an email labeled urgent, saying there was an incident at the stairwell of one of the properties on Sunday night, and could I pull the relevant CCTV footage and put it on a DVD. I had to do this fairly frequently. I skip through the footage, find the incident, usually a fight or blatant drug dealing, and burn it to DVD for the police. The email never mentioned what the incident was, so I skip through the footage and watch as a clearly very agitated man ties a rope around a stair rail at the top of the stairs, then his neck, looks over the rail and then just casually tips forward over it. The rope flipped him round, and he dangled there twitching for far too long, before he just stopped. So yeah, that was a fun Monday. They really should have warned you. That's a hell of a thing to just expect someone to watch and record. Warning, we had an incident involving someone who was hung. Still wasn't expecting what was on the video. Urgent hanged it. Wasn't a security officer, but I worked at a 247 gas station for a while. One night my coworker accidentally killed himself while at work, and I made the mistake of watching the footage. He went to the back of the store with a bag of drugs, probably cocaine, snorted it and started acting funny for about 10 minutes. He then sits in the back office and gets fidgety thrashing around until finally he just goes limp in the chair. He had died of a heart attack and sat there for 5 hours before anybody came in, thought the absence of an employee was strange, and called the cops. It was really weird seeing people come in and act all pissy for the lack of service. They'd just leave thinking someone was lazy. But nah. Dude was dead. Saw a chicken walk up the side of a tree at 2 a.m. This one's too much even for LiveLeak. LiveLeak. Get the cluck out of here. Was watching CCTV footage of a parking deck, and on the 9th level Therese this guy sitting in the middle of the deck, banging his head on one of the pillars. All of a sudden the guy just stops, and runs to the edge. Without stopping or jumping, he flings himself over the edge. I immediately called dispatch and told them what had happened. Few days later I was offered counseling for those events. I'm glad you were. A lad I grew up with works security at a large shopping mall. Security get radioed to a jumper. He is first on scene, blood everywhere, body in a complete state. After emergency services left the scene, they washed down the bus access road and he was ordered back to work. He wasn't offered counseling or a day off to gather his thoughts. I hope you're doing better now. Whereabouts was this? Sounds similar to one near me a while ago. Guy jumped from shopping center car park onto a busway below. To make it worse, it was just as school was finishing, and around the corner from my school, he was a few feet from one of the buses filled with school kids. Just outside Cambridge, UK. This was a few years back. Since then they've installed suicide prevention fences. Not the same then, which sort of makes it worse. Both were a few years ago, and there's suicide prevention fences on the top of the car park now too though. I work in a retail store, and for a while I worked security here. Watching the security cameras wasn't technically my job, but we were consistently short-handed in that department and the manager was grooming me for promotion, so I got to fill in and watch the cameras occasionally. One day when we were reviewing footage from overnights, we saw this teenager calmly set down his shopping basket, take off his hat and glasses, and just charge at a wall. Hit it head on. He did this 2 more times. When he was done, his face was a bloody mess, and he put his hat and glasses back on and just left. Weirded me right the hell out. Someone needs to explain this. Fraud was my first thought. I slipped and fell, so I'm suing your store for damages. God damn it. Over Christmas I slipped and fell in a store, then used a shopping cart as a walker to get to my car and drove myself to an urgent care where I was unable to get from my car to the building, so I had to ask someone walking past to go in and get help. It was raining and my touchscreen phone was wet and wouldn't work. Inside, I found out I had a broken leg and was in shock. I was off my feet for 3 months and still have some residual nerve pinching in my knee. You're telling me people fucking do that on purpose and get paid for it? But did you sue? Mostly lots of sex. I've had to turn on the microphone and tell them to stop it or they'll be thrown out of the college gym. It have just started narrating. In the voice of David Attenborough, and here we observe the mating habits of young Homo sapiens in their natural habitats. Sadly, the young male is underendowed. Hey ducky dude. The young male appears agitated. This could be a result of his underendowment. The female appears to be less in heat. Possibly due to the male being extremely underendowed. Did I mention they have a small PP? Possibly as a result of being underendowed. The female appears to be faking her climax, which is definitely a result of the male being both underendowed and having no previous sexual relations. I'm watching every male's nightmare playing out in front of me right now, folks. This is Shakespearean in scale. I used to work loss prevention for a big box store. We had a lady get arrested for public indecency and I was asked to investigate. I had to follow her backwards from the point of arrest and it was a trip to say the least. She arrived at the store swerving and nearly hitting several cars. She entered the store with 2 young children, both of whom are mentally handicapped. That lady literally dragged those kids around the store, slapping them and tugging at their ear collars if they didn't obey. At some point she just abandons them in the clothing section, walks through the back doors, to the break area, and I'm assuming she thought it was the bathroom because she proceeds to pull down her pants and shits all over the fire exit door. She pulls her pants up, without wiping mind you, and goes back to the floor like nothing happened. Someone saw what she did and followed her. Luckily Therese an officer in the store at the time and quickly approaches her when the associate tells him what she did. Needless to say, she was definitely high and or drunk and was arrested. The scary part is, she did not mention those kids not one time. It wasn't until I reviewed the tape that I saw they were just still waiting by the shopping cart completely oblivious and afraid to move. Child Services was later called and I still think about those kids often. Breaks my heart to think about the bullshit those kids must still be going through. Big box store for some reason, even though you didn't mention the store, the entire time I was reading this I was imagining a Walmart. I do not envy LP people that have to check the security cameras at Walmart because I feel like this isn't the worst kind of stuff they could see. I imagined Walmart as well. It began in my mind as a Costco. Then turned into a Target with the mention of clothes. Once someone is shitting on the fire exit doors and then casually walking around, Walmart. I used to do asset protection for a Walmart in a very heroin-addicted area. The creepiest thing was seeing how fast someone would go from completely normal to absolutely out of it in the span of a year because of the drug. You could build a timeline of their demise through CCTV pictures and video. One man in particular really stood out to me. The first time I apprehended him he was very polite and intelligent. Just stealing to get his fix. A year later and the 4th time I caught him he was basically a shell of a man. He tried running from me and I looked him right in the eyes and said, "I know you, Gary last name, please don't run." The look on his face of someone knowing him who he couldn't even remember will always stay with me. I investigated internal loss for Target and one time, as I was walking a lady, who stole thousands of dollars worth of stuff, out in handcuffs with the police, she turned to me and said, "Thanks for being so nice to me." I will never forget that. I used to do its support for a company that had a lot of heavy machinery moving around inside a big warehouse type area. This giant front-end loader would scoop up material and dump it into a hopper. Along the sides of the floor were these huge concrete barriers. I've heard them called Jersey barriers and mafia blocks, but they are about 10 feet tall, and this one guy's life was ended when the front-end loader inadvertently scooped the base of the barrier and landed on one of 2 guys walking shoulder to shoulder through the plant. I was tasked to review the footage, then make copies, 6 of them, to be exact, and then ensure that the footage worked and was self-executable and able to be run from a USB stick. So I had to watch the footage of this guy get killed over a dozen times. I, too, was offered counseling for just watching the video. Did you take the counseling? I've heard it's extremely beneficiary after seeing such trauma. Even just talking about it, telling someone else, unloads the burden. I've already been diagnosed with PTSD, so I just added it to my sessions. It really does help. I would advise anyone that has gone through anything like this accept some kind of counseling. I only saw it in 720p, and it was tough. Still is. First responders see this kind of thing all the time. It was good to talk some of them. Funny thing, a lot of them thanked me for letting them talk about their experiences.